Welcome to the Daikaiju Network Podcast, our first live podcast, and it's
Woo!
via YouTube. Yeah. And why is nothing showing up? Oh, I think it's loading.
Because it's a delay.
Oh, I
You
see.
gotta remember this, okay? We did the test thing.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, here we are. So far, things are working. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a healthy obsession with kaiju. I am a kaiju hunter here. Jason's
And
got.
I got this rag t-shirt that's kind of like a Game of Thrones inspiration. I got this. I think it was a few G-Fests ago.
It was like 2 G-Fests ago, approximately.
Yeah, it was when Shinpei Hayashiya was attending that event.
By the way, is there anyone out there watching this live? If so, please type something in the chat. I know there's a little bit of a delay from when we're saying this to when it's actually showing up on the feed. So if anyone's out there, just type in something like hello or whatever.
Yeah, well, I also made sure to add a link on our Facebook page. I should probably add it onto our Twitter page as well. So if you have anything to talk about while I do that, you can go right ahead.
Well, what I was just going to do, I was just taking our link and making sure going to our Facebook page and saying we are now live.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah, I know for the time being right now, things are going to be a little bit basic since we're kind of new to doing all these live stream things. I've been kind of looking at some videos from time to time here recently about doing some things through this software program called OBS, where we can do. It's kind of like a program. It's a free software that you can download. I think for both PC and Mac, and it's kind of like a TV production thing, which some of you out there might know what I'm talking about. So if you've seen some of your favorite live streams here on YouTube or Twitch and all that, I'm basically assuming that most of these people use OBS for some of their live streams with all these flashy graphics, text, and then with a kind of the live chat kind of on the side, to the side here, and then like a picture or two of the live feeds off to the side there. So, so yeah, we're just kind of going basic for right now.
Yeah, so I posted a link, so hopefully that that works. But anyways, for this particular episode, in case some of you didn't know, we are talking about Rampage.
Rampage.
Rampage, last week's #1 movie, shouldn't be any surprise to anyone, and that's what we're here to discuss. I don't know if you have anything else to discuss, but for me, it's about the movie. This particular episode.
The only thing that I can discuss is that went through quite the snowstorm up here last weekend just to try to see the movie itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was quite the whiteout up here in Minnesota, and then it's like as soon as the movie got done, it got even worse. So that kind of highlighted my weekend on from when seeing that movie.
I'm posting this even on my own Facebook profile.
Well, I bet you are.
Okay. So anyway, let's just get right into the discussion here. Rampage. I'm trying to figure out kind of where to begin exactly. I listened to a podcast here earlier in the week in which they discuss Rampage, and surprisingly enough, I really thought that this particular podcast that I listened to on a frequent basis, I really thought they were going to recommend and give a thumbs up to Rampage, considering the fact that not only at least from Rotten Tomatoes standpoint, is this the highest rated video game movie of all time, which I find a little weird. I really personally think the first Mortal Kombat would be at least a little bit higher. But at the same time, I was like, this still, in my personal opinion, is a very good representation of the game, while at the same time grounding it more uh, into a type of movie in which general audiences could embrace.
Mm-hmm.
And what I thought was really strange about this one podcast is that these guys these guys went to film school and everything, and these guys can be quite picky with how they do movies sometimes. But then when they discuss certain movies that they like, they become, the typical sort of fanboy type things. And I don't necessarily mean that in a derogatory way. Like, I am a fanboy of Godzilla 98. I've never made that a secret. Like, I love that movie. I will defend it until the day I die. But it's really strange how they go about doing some of these things. And I really thought that at least 2 out of the 3 co-hosts would give a thumbs up to the film. And no, they didn't. And they got all 3 thumbs down. And one of the strangest things I thought that they brought up was that they wanted it to be like the video game, meaning that you had the monsters, like their actual video games, where you had Lizzie on 2 legs, looking like a human and all buff and everything like in the game. Same thing with Ralph and, George a little bit too.
But then when it comes to something like that, and if you have something grounded, kind of like in a live action, like this Rampage here, if you see any of those like Lizzie and Ralph standing up on their 2 feet, that's not going to look good at all.
Well, I think it would be fun for those of us who love that video game, for those of us who are fans.
Maybe as a computer animation movie, then yes, I can see that.
The problem, though, is that if you're talking about a general audience, it just won't sell on that front.
Right.
It would have bombed at the box office. People would have made fun of it. Its Rotten Tomatoes score would have dropped. And there was even this particular story involving The Rock at one point where he got shot, where at that point he was supposed to turn into a monster. And they scrapped it, obviously, in the final draft of the film. And they thought that would have worked out well. And I'm like, no, it wouldn't have. Again, it would have made the film incredibly cheesy. But
yeah.
And I would have been okay with it. But the thing is, though, let's face it, a lot of films anymore are not only geared towards trying to please the original fan base, your Batman films, your Marvel films, your Rampage films, your, whatever. They're not only geared towards trying to please the fans, but they understand that some of these, like giant monster films, are niche films. You're not going to make a movie that cost $160 million and get that back from a small group of fans who are diehard fans here in the state. You're never going to do that unless somehow, some way, like giant monster fandom just explodes and it's like just about everybody in the state. That's never going to happen. So you have to try to make a movie in which serves both your big fans, your big fan base, and the general movie-going audience that either may know a little something about it or may know next to nothing about it at all. And they kind of poo-pooed the whole realism thing. And would I like to see a Rampage movie in which Lizzie, Ralph, and George are all looking like their human anthropomorphic selves, like from the video games? Sure, I think that would be a lot of fun. But again, and I'm basically showing my hand here, I might as well just come out and say it. I kind of painted myself in a corner here. I think the movie worked. I think the movie worked well.
I think out of all the video game movies I've heard of and or have seen so far, I think this is probably the best one I've seen.
In my personal opinion, at the very least, this ties Mortal Kombat. At the very least, it ties that film.
Out of those two, if If you have to choose one of them, which
I
one
can't
would you?
choose right now. I cannot. I've seen Mortal Kombat many times over the last like 22 years. I have to, and I've only seen Rampage once, and I love it, but I have to see it at least several more times, at least, to really get a good idea of where I think it stands. At the very least, it's tied for first place because sadly, the video game genre has sort of sucked. Um, I would say, though, the only exceptions have been the first Mortal Kombat film, this Rampage film, and I would even argue the Resident Evil series,
I would
especially the
say
first Resident Evil,
I would at least
especially the first
say,
Resident Evil film.
yeah, I would say at least the first two.
Street Fighter sucks. So did Street Fighter Chun-Li or whatever that one was called. Sadly, Doom sucked. Double Dragon was awful. Mortal Kombat Annihilation is a guilty pleasure of mine. I think it's better than what most people believe it is. But yes, that sadly is a downer. I'm just trying to think of what all Super Mario Brothers.
I think you can at least consider Wreck-It Ralph as one of them, even though it's not really a video game, but it's a movie based on, the collaboration of old school games.
His name came from the wolf from Rampage.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, before we really dive really deep into this discussion here, let's just kind of quickly go over what the film is about. And it's pretty typical for this type of film. The Rock plays Davis Okoye, who is a primatologist at the San Diego Wildlife Reserve. He basically takes care of George and kind of George's sort of primate family in there. And then there are these canisters that come from outer space, which were put up there by the Energine Company, in which they were doing Project Rampage. Something went horribly wrong in which a rat mutated and basically killed just about everyone aboard except this gal. And she barely got away, but then because of a complication in which the rat made happen, she burnt up in the sky. These mutagen containers come down. Ralph gets infected. And was it Wyoming? I think it is. One gets swallowed up by a crocodile in the Florida Everglades. And then, of course, George is exposed. The animals grow larger. But, of course, we follow George more than the other two. Rampaging occurs, and the animals get larger. Davis Okoye and this other gal whose character name I forget off the top of my head, they team up. She used to be with Energine. She was
Kate Caldwell.
Kate Caldwell. She was part of Project Rampage, but at the time it wasn't Project Rampage. She was building a sort of kind of a lack of a better term, sort of medication to help with her brother, her dying brother. But instead, Energine, run by the Wyden, I think brother and sister is what I think they are.
Yeah, that's what it was. The Winds or
the Wydens.
Yeah, the Wydens.
And they weaponized it to Project Rampage, and then what ends up occurring is that the Wydens, in order to try to get some blood specimens from either George or Ralph or Lizzie, they send out this biosensor signal off the top of Willis Tower, which their office is based off of. It's a signal that's going to make the creatures go crazy. And the idea from the Wydens is that once the animals get there, they hope that the military can easily defeat those creatures and then they can get their samples. Well, then George and Ralph come. They basically are teaming up because they both hate the sound. They're trying to get rid of the source. And obviously the military can't help because with the Project Rampage, the serum has basically not only toughened their hide, it has basically given them super healing capabilities as well. So they go on a rampage through Chicago. Eventually Lizzie shows up. And then in kind of a nice little Easter egg, George will wind up eating the one Wyden girl who is in a red dress, where if you've ever played the original Rampage game, a gal in a red dress was always considered a lot of points. And Kate had put this particular serum on this Wyden gal, in which George ate, which in turn got rid of George's aggression, and he kind of became his normal self, but he's still giant. and then he ends up fighting against Ralph and Lizzie, and then of course, obviously, the sensor is destroyed. Willis Tower comes tumbling down, and Davis is able to trick Ralph into going into Lizzie's mouth. Lizzie kills Ralph, and then eventually, after a big long battle, George ends up killing Lizzie, and basically the movie ends with George giving Davis the finger and doing some sort of, sex hand signals, and then the movie ends on a happy note. So in a sort of a nutshell, that's kind of the gist of Rampage. We'll definitely get into more specifics here as we discuss the film. Right away, though, I want to say, and sadly, another podcast beat me to it, but I immediately thought about it when the movie started. That rat on the space station, I almost wonder if that was intentional, and I call it Curtis because anyone who's played Rampage 2 Universal Tour for the N64 and PlayStation, you can play as a rat called Curtis in that game.
Well, and I think, too, they also focus on the rat that was for one of the Widens there quite a bit.
I noticed that too. It made me wonder, and I'm glad the movie didn't tease a sequel, because most movies anymore of this caliber, of this sort of sci-fi action genre, tend to tease sequels, and in some cases leave them open-ended. Thankfully, this movie doesn't do that, but I noticed that too, where I'm like, are they sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudging at the fans who know these games and are like, oh, here's a rat. Anyone played Rampage 2 from the mid-90s for your Nintendo 64 where there was a character named Curtis? I thought of that, and I'm just like, that's kind of neat. I even wondered perhaps at one point maybe we would get a Curtis, like towards the end of kind of the big climax here. I thought maybe something would go wrong or what. It didn't happen, but I thought that was pretty neat doing the whole rat thing. I'm not sure if that was intentional to sort of give a wink, wink, nudge, nudge to the fans, or if that just happened to be because, oh, hey, people test rats, and this is kind of what happened.
Yeah, and I can also, when you kind of say with some of these other films, when they kind of do a tease of possibly doing a sequel and all that, I think they kind of somewhat did it kind of more of in a better way, I would say, as far as kind of somewhat teasing it, but also kind of more or less kind of doing it kind of more and kind of like that wink, wink sort of thing, or just kind of blending it in as part of the movie instead of just having it like right at the end there.
Mm-hmm. And I really thought it was interesting. Well, I don't know if I would call it interesting. One thing I found interesting, another thing was something that I was pleasantly surprised about. The thing that sort of, I just totally forgot. The one thing that I thought was interesting was how much violence and how intense it got at various points in these films. When Ralph is going after that sort of military strike team, for lack of a better term, I could not believe how brutal that got. And then, of course, the flashback to when George was a baby primate, and you can see a brief clip, and then you see it in the reflection of George's eyes, his mother getting hacked up by poachers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, too, there at the end for the final fight between the three monsters, you had Lizzie decapitating Ralph, although that was kind of done in shadow, so you hid most of the gross stuff. That, to me, still, though, the decapitation of Ralph still, in my opinion, is one of the disturbing scenes in this film, even though I understand it's just, a CGI character. But I thought that was a little intense and brutal. And then the whole impaling of George, I thought was big too. I mean, I even thought too, Lizzie at one point, because I didn't know how this was going to end. I honestly thought all three creatures were going to die in this film. And to be quite honest, I think that's how it should have ended.
That's kind of what I thought it was going to lead up to.
And I really thought Lizzie was going to do the death blow to George, but he maybe would survive just long enough to defeat Lizzie. Like, I thought at one point she was going to do the whole crocodile thing, you know, like where they, you know, shake their prey and like roll over or whatever. And George would then figure out a way to just barely live long enough somehow to kill Lizzie and then die shortly after that.
Well, it kind of end up being like that.
Sort of.
But with a different outcome that we saw in the movie.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you think it was? I kind of know the answer because you already told me this. But what do you think of the whole idea of actually keeping George alive?
I thought it was pretty good because then, like what you mentioned earlier, it about the other movies kind of teasing. This is kind of one of them that kind of somewhat teases of them. Maybe there could be a sequel to this if there's enough interest into doing it. But nevertheless, I really enjoyed, or at least liked him being alive towards the end, because throughout the entire movie, since we kind of known what's Johnson's character's name? Davis
Okoye
and George, and it's like he kind of they built this entire kind of relationship between the viewer and these characters, and you can kind of, it made you feel like that you're part of these characters here. And right at the end, when we knew that he was alive, it's like, oh, thank God.
Mm-hmm. You talk about the tease there. Like I was saying, I kind of went in, and part of me thought, yeah, they're going to keep George alive because primates, we are closer to primates than we are to wolves and to reptiles. And on a certain level, I'm not going to lie, that sort of disappointed me to some respects, because I was like, why don't we try to stay more neutral in this? But at the same time, the way the movie does it, it's just like, okay, I get it. I understand. I still wish it was maybe done just a little bit differently. But the whole tease at the end, I thought was really good. They had me, but at the same time, in the moment, I wasn't shocked. I'm like, this is what I expected. I expected all three of them to die, because I don't expect them to think that there's going to be a sequel unless they pulled out some sort of little teaser or something at the end or whatever. But at the same time, yeah, I felt some sadness at George dying when I thought he had died. But at the same time, again, I was like, I kind of expected this. This makes sense. But then when he was alive and everything, I was kind of like, okay, this is a happy ending. I'm okay with that. I'm like, George, Lizzie had the big long teeth, and Lizzie got at Ralph's legs pretty good. I'm like,
yeah,
George really should be kind of bleeding out, quite frankly. But oh well.
Well,
and
when it comes, kind of like what you mentioned earlier with their high regeneration rate, which kind of also plays into that. So I can kind of see it. But at first, when I saw him kind of quote unquote dying, I originally thought that all of them were going to die in that, and I'm probably guessing that was probably one of their original intents of doing the movie, of having all three of them.
It was
die in this.
But
then I was kind of surprised that George was alive.
I don't know if you've read this article. I forget where the original source was. I read it here like a couple of days ago. The Dwayne Johnson was having a discussion. He was sort of having, not really like a fight, but sort of like a disagreement with the studio. And I don't know if it was the director or another producer or writer or somebody, where he was like, no, I do not want this to happen. The Rock is like, I know my audience. I want people to come to my movies and to have fun and have a happy ending because life gets down and depressing as it is. I want people to come and have fun at my movies. And so I guess he fought over it for like 2 months and then finally won over whoever he was fighting with. And so it was changed for George to end up surviving after all. And um, I was kind of like, okay, I understand why, but yeah, I was kind of expecting this. I'm like, personally, with George surviving, I'm okay with it. I
Mhm.
mean, it obviously makes sense again. I thought it was a little strange though, like at the end when the camera's panning out and you see George helping people get off buildings there, he wasn't limping because I'm like, that one leg was pretty shredded. I'm like, why is he like not limping or anything like that?
Well, kind of like what I said too with their regeneration rate, it could have healed up quite a bit, especially when he was there, kind of lying there for quite a bit of time for at least that generation to heal up pretty quickly. So that's
That could be it.
my only guess. Yeah.
Yeah. A thing that pleasantly surprised me now, because we already talked about the violence, a thing that pleasantly surprised me was how much heart this movie has in it. The fact that you took this very simple concept in which is basically just giant mutated creatures destroying buildings. That's really the whole premise of the Rampage games, and you actually, built a pretty good story in it, and you brought in emotion, and you brought in a care and attention to it that I'm not gonna lie, probably this movie origin really didn't deserve because it's based off a video game where it's just giant monsters trashing urban areas. And I went into this movie, I wasn't expecting that. I'm like, look, I'm expecting this to just be a fun popcorn flick in which three giant monsters just trash cities. And I'm like, as long as they provide that, I'm happy. I'm not looking for a big story or anything like that because, again, I knew the material, I knew what it was about, and how simple it was. And that's all I was expecting. I'm like, just give me the monsters trash in the cities. If you do that, I'm going to say you're very much like the video game, and I will go out happy. And it actually had a good story behind it. You had decent characters. I mean, it's not the greatest story ever told, but for something like this, where it had a simple original concept from the original source material, it had a good story. It had a story that I went along with. It was a story that I bought. It was a story that had fairly good acting for the most part. Um, it was a movie that uh, I dug, and as I remember sitting there in the theaters. By the way, the theater I saw it in, 3/4 of the way full opening night. So, and of course, ticket receipts are obviously
Yeah.
number one movie in the world last
And
year.
in the
Um,
theater that I was in on the day when it was snowing and a complete whiteout there, there was a good handful of people in there, even with that incredible snowstorm that we had this last weekend.
mhm. Yeah, and this movie has a lot of heart. It's got a good story to it. It's not the greatest story, but when you consider the original source material it was based off of, it's in my opinion, it's good. I mean, it does the job and it does it well.
Mm.
And I was pleasantly surprised by that. I walked out and I'm like, I did not expect that kind of a story where it actually tried to tell a story. I'm like, oh, just giant monsters somehow magically pop up and all things go to shit. And
Right.
no, that's not what happened. And I would have been okay with that, but that's not what happened.
Nope.
Um, we need to talk about our human characters here. I feel like they're going to get overlooked because obviously this movie is about, the giant monsters. What do you think of the acting here and our characters and the like?
as far as um the main characters of this, with of course obviously The Rock, the main elephant in the room of this whole thing. He did a really great job in this, and as far as of course betraying his character and kind of really caring for George, and obviously the work that he does in this, and kind of also knowing some of the backgrounds of with him being a Marine, and how he wasn't much of a people person from what he's seen through wars and all that overseas. But when it comes to the Widens, to me, they were okay, but probably not the greatest villains out there.
Very cookie cutter villains.
Yeah, they were a little bit cheesy. I would admit that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But when the brother Wyden, when he went out, when he dropped off his laptop and everything to that FBI informant, then ran outside, and then it's like I knew this was coming when both of them were looking outside and all that. Is like something's gonna happen with this guy, and then sure enough, he gets squished by the rebel and stuff from above.
That was pretty. Well, what I thought was going to happen was it was either going to be Ralph. I thought maybe Ralph was going to run by and like snatch him up.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I thought was going to happen. I knew he was going to die. I just thought Ralph was going to come along and get him.
And then the guy who plays as Harvey Russell, let's see here, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, who plays basically I'm probably guessing the FBI guy. Don't quote me on that.
He does.
He does.
Well, he's not FBI. He's kind of like John Turturro's character from Transformers, where he's kind of the head of this secret government organization that nobody really knows about.
This is, according to this, a government agent who works for an agency called OGA. But I think he did a really good job with his role and how he portrayed his character. I think from what I've seen in the trailers and all that, I thought he was going to be probably overused in this movie. But after I seen the movie and all that, I think he was used pretty well. I think he was used whenever he needed to be in certain parts of the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like most of the characters in this film. I guess, I guess really the one major complaint a person could have, and I think this is very typical for a movie like this, is the fact that you don't get a ton of depth with these types of characters. But again, I wasn't expecting anything great to begin with. I was expecting just giant monsters and shit being torched.
Well, that's basically what it is all about. I mean, you're not going to get a whole lot of human drama in this. You're just there for the destruction rampage part of the film. But I think when it comes to this movie, I think they kind of balanced it out a little bit.
I thought it was really good by and large. I thought though Davis's character arc, the way it was resolved, so to speak, and I don't know if I would call it even being resolved, where obviously his whole deal is that he can't trust people because he worked for the government and went after poachers, and he would eventually end up killing George's mother's poachers. And basically his whole deal is like, I like animals. They get me. Things are pretty straightforward. People suck. People lie and cheat and murder and do all these sorts of things to get what they want. Animals are different. They love you. It's either a thumbs up or thumbs down. They either like you or they don't. And they let you know either way. And basically towards the end, I guess, and I sort of saw it, and at least I think his facial expression there, kind of towards the end of the film there, where I think he kind of looks at Kate, and you, at least this is how I saw it, that maybe he realized, okay, maybe there's at least one person I can trust now too. And then, of course, Kate plants that seed earlier in the film. I think it was after that whole plane crash scene where where he was talking about how he can't trust people. And then she tells him, well, what about George? If there's anybody who shouldn't trust people, it's George, because he saw humans kill his mom, and yet he trusts you. And so you can tell, like, Davis is kind of like, you can tell on his facial expression, oh, that's a good point. Mm-hmm. As far as his arc, I'm okay with it not being resolved. I think on a certain level we're supposed to think it is, but even if it is supposed to be resolved, it's pretty paper thin. But at the same time, again, I'm okay with it because, again, of the fact we are watching a film based off of a video game in which it has a simple premise of just giant creatures destroying shit. And I'm okay with that. I love Dwayne Johnson's acting. I was talking to you yesterday when we were doing a test here. I was telling you, look, you got to watch Jumanji and everything because Dwayne Johnson is awesome in it, and so are the other actors and everything in it. But Dwayne Johnson has some of the best lines and expressions and moments in that film. Mm-hmm. And of course, I do like The Rock as an actor. I think he is very charismatic. I haven't seen all of his films, but I do like him here. I like him in Jumanji. I like him in Gridiron Gang. I like him in Walking Tall. I like him in Central Intelligence.
In one of the G.I. Joe movies.
I haven't watched any of the G.I. Joe films or any of the Fast and Furious films.
The G.I. Joe ones are pretty good. I've never even bothered seeing the Fast and Furious ones.
The Fast and Furious films never interested me.
Same here.
But I do like Dwayne Johnson an awful lot here in the film. Naomi Harris, who plays Kate Caldwell, I thought she was pretty darn good. I thought she sold me on her story. Malin Ackerman, who plays Claire Wyden, cookie cutter villain. She basically has kind of this death glare stare at you most of the movie. And again, I'm okay with that because that's not what this movie's about. It's not about a human villain. It's basically about giant monsters again. And then you have Jeffrey Dean Morgan. I like him an awful lot. I don't watch Walking Dead. I know of it. I'm not a zombie fan or anything like that, but my understanding is that he's a main reason why a lot of people anymore are still continuing to watch that series. And then you have Jake Lacey. I swear I've seen him before. I can't place him, though, in other films, but obviously he's supposed to be sort of the doofusy type of
yeah, I know. I've seen
relief here.
I've seen him somewhere before. Let me check here in his filmography.
And you can tell, you can definitely tell that really there are only a few main characters in this film that really matter, because the next guy who is basically getting sort of a semi-top bill is Joe Manganiello, if I'm pronouncing that last name correctly. He plays that head, oh gosh, I forget the term, the head sort of commander in that deal against Ralph in the forest. He's next in line. The Office. I've definitely seen him in The Office.
Yeah,
That's probably where I've seen him.
Yeah, The Office, and then apparently he made an appearance on Last Week Tonight.
Yeah, I don't watch it, so I think The Office is where I've seen him.
Yeah,
but I do like most of our characters here. Again, you're not getting anything really too grand, but I think you're getting more than what this movie really deserves, to be quite honest. And that's okay. Definitely. Again, that was one of the pleasant surprises I thought of this movie, was that you got not only good acting, but you got characters who have, some decent depth to them. Mm-hmm. Again, you're not going to get any Academy Awards for writing for this film.
Definitely not.
you don't need to for this type of film. Everybody knew when they were making this film, this is a popcorn film.
Mm.
Maybe the best thing you can hope for is maybe a nomination for effects or something like that, or even sound editing. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, everybody knew what they were making with this film.
Right.
So you lead the discussion next year.
What do you think of the visual effects to Rampage?
Very good, although there were a couple moments, albeit brief, in which you could tell it was green screen or something like that. I don't have a tremendous problem with something like that. I noticed it a few times in Pacific Rim Uprising. As long as it's not like really terrible or something like that, I'm okay with it. Because I mean, look, we all know kind of, how these films are made. We're not
Right.
3, 4, 5, 6 years old in which we're thinking what we see on the screen is real, like I did for a while when I was a kid. I do like it. I love the effects an awful lot. The film, I think, had a budget of 160 million, if I remember correctly.
Let me see here.
I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, the budget is 120 million.
Well,
And
120 million.
And the box office I'm seeing here, I'm not sure if it includes worldwide or anything, but the show's 209.1 million.
That would have to be worldwide. It would have to be, I think.
Let me check Box Office Mojo then.
But I was really pleasantly surprised by that too, because I knew this movie wasn't going to have a tremendous budget, but I knew obviously it was going to have enough to pay people like Dwayne Johnson, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and then of course to have some decent effects in it, and then of course the tearing down of Chicago and especially the Willis Tower, beautiful effects work. I guess as I'm talking about this topic, I have to sort of at the same time talk a little bit about a few other things because it matters, because they involve visual effects, like the monster battles and action throughout the film, especially the end. I thought was great because not only was it just executed well and animated very well, but you got a lot of it too. I really thought the final climax, basically, kind of once you look at kind of when George and Ralph first are shown into Chicago proper, from that point on to the end of the movie, I think it's like a half hour, maybe even longer than that. I mean, you get decent action, you get great destruction as the creatures are rampaging, no pun intended, through Chicago and then going up Willis Tower. And then when they fight each other after that, I thought it was very spectacular. And then one complaint, though, however, and I'm sure it had a lot to do with the budget, and this is really my only complaint about the film, and at the same time, it's not that big of a complaint because I still think in the end product we got is still very good, is the fact that we didn't get as much rampaging scenes. We didn't get as many George, Ralph, and Lizzie going through like Minneapolis, destroying it, or going through I'm just trying to think, like Omaha, going through Des Moines, going through St. Louis, on their way to Chicago or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess another complaint I have, and again, this is a very small one, it doesn't really bug me a whole lot, is the fact that we didn't get quite as much time with Ralph and Lizzie. I thought that there should have been a little bit more time spent with them, especially with Lizzie. I'm like, Lizzie's the biggest out of the three monsters, and I just thought it was a little strange that a creature that size basically went undetected until it hit Chicago. I'm like, that's kind of bunk. But again, I'm like, okay, wait a minute here, Ken. Well, this is a popcorn B movie.
Well,
slow down here.
Plus, it was swimming in a river, so it was probably kind of hiding itself.
Right, but still, again, you would think people would see it, as they're driving over. I don't know if it went up the Mississippi or not or whatever, but let's say it did. You would think people driving over a bridge, going over the Mississippi River in various spots, would notice something like that. You would think too it would have to stop occasionally, like for food or whatever, that it would destroy certain locations along the way. Again, rampaging. But again, like I said, even though those are really the only two complaints I have about the film, they're very minor, because I still think in the big scheme of things, what we got, I still think was very good. And then getting back to the visual effects, very good, very well done. Uh, just marvelous. I mean, it's not 100% spectacular through and through. There are a couple of little blips here and there, but again, I don't think they hurt the film in any way, shape, or form. If anything, for a film like this, a popcorn B movie monster film that had a pretty decent budget behind it, and all, and is more or less, the core of the film is about monsters destroying stuff. It's exceptional in my personal opinion, and I think this is the visual effects are top notch. I mean, I will give them an A for it. I will be like, look, I don't care if you have a few soft spots in your work here, and there, but because basically the final product and what you set out to achieve, you succeeded. So that's my long-winded answer, I guess, about the visual effects.
The visual effects have really kind of made those the three, George, Ralph, and Lizzie, as part of the whole environment there. And it really kind of blended in. I really liked the destruction of the whole Chicago area, and kind of with the final battle and the like, and then some of the other visual effects that they needed in there for necessary things. My only complaint is just a little gripe, and I just kind of saw this, is when George was quote unquote dead, and Davis was kind of holding George's hand there and just kind of looking up. When you kind of see Davis's hand kind of over part of George's, I think probably one of his appendages, you can definitely tell that was all CGI. It kind of looked a little bit a little bit cheesy, and just kind of that part. I think they probably should have done a little bit of a better job kind of blending that part of the hand around one of George's fingers there, or part of his hand. But other than that, that's kind of my only complaint or gripe on the visual effects part. I didn't really see anything else that was kind of out of the ordinary when it comes to visual effects. That was kind of the only part that I saw, which was kind of basically at the end part there. But with the budget of $120 million, I think they did a pretty good job with the kind of money that they had. When it comes, I would say maybe when it comes to that sort of a budget, you probably wouldn't get quite as much visual effects that you would get with this movie. You would probably expect a little bit more of a budget, but I think they did a pretty good job pulling off with what they had.
So, speaking of a budget, what were your numbers from Box Office Mojo?
That was basically the total number.
Oh.
So, because it says domestic, it was 50.6 mil, and foreign was 141.6.
Mm-hmm. I sent you a link there in our little group chat there, to check out for a brief moment there. I think you might find slightly interesting, but yeah, we have to now, I think, move to sort of the elephant in the room, so to speak, and that is looking at the monsters, their design, their execution, their abilities, and stuff of that sort. I guess I will go first with this. Again, obviously they're adding realism to it. Lizzie, basically, obviously it's a crocodile with some major tusks and some spines along its back, and its tail and kind of a flail. It doesn't work on my big figure here, but and then of course Ralph, a wolf, who was quadruped. One of the interesting things about Ralph, though, did you had to have seen it because it was very obvious. As he and George get into Chicago, like not only do they have tough hides, but it seemed almost as if George's fur was like quills or armor, and that he brought out like porcupine spikes and used his tail and he shot the quills.
Yeah,
I can't believe I'm doing a butt motion.
That was pretty interesting because you don't even see Ralph or any of the other two animals. They even have special kind of powers or kind of special kind of abilities, whereas in this movie you did, which was pretty unique because as far as I can remember of us playing the games, I've never seen anything like that.
Right. I mean, basically in the game, all the characters are the same. It wasn't until you got to Rampage 2 for the Nintendo 64 and PlayStation in which there were subtle differences between them. And the subtle differences were that, like, maybe George was a better puncher than, say, Lizzie, but then Lizzie could run faster than George. I mean, that was about it. That was the only thing that was really distinguishing one monster from the next. Otherwise, they're basically the same thing. The only real difference is, who do you want to be? Do you want to be an ape? Do you want to be a rat? Do you want to be a rhinoceros? What do you want to be, basically? And
unless if I'm guessing with probably the most recent Rampage video game, which I'm guessing it was the Wii version, that they might have had powers in that. But I haven't even played that game, so I wouldn't have any idea. So I'm assuming from what I have seen that I've never seen any unique special abilities from either of these three.
Yeah. And I have to say, again, it's kind of cliche because we've seen it in other types of films in the past. The whole dog barking at Ralph and then Ralph roaring at it's a nonsensical throwaway scene. It doesn't need to be there, but I thought it was pretty cute. I have to say, though, I've grown to love Ralph more because of this film. And again, I think, I'm not going to lie, I think part of it too is because I thought he had a horrible death. I mean, that just, for whatever strange reason, that death is the one death in a film that I've seen in recent years that has just kind of like really disturbed me. I'm just like, that's just so unfair. But I understand why it happened the way that it did. But
yeah, and speaking of Ralph, that's the only figure, like one of those stretch figures that I need to get. And I was over at Walmart earlier today after I picked up the new God of War game for the PS4, and they still didn't have any of the three at the Walmart since I last took the last two of both the George and the Lizzie figures. So,
well, yeah, I mean, like I checked out my Walmart the other day just to see what they had there, because obviously I showed you my figures when I bought them here like a few weeks ago, and I could find all the figures basically that except for the stretchy Ralph. I could find the stretchy George and Lizzie. I had to go online to get the Ralph. But
I may have to go to some other Walmart outside of my suburban area here, and just to see if I can find a Ralph.
Yeah, Amazon selling, but they're like $22. But
right.
Yeah, I dig the creature design. I mean, again, you're trying to ground the movie, so to speak, more. George, obviously, I mean, who's kidding who? There's not a ton of difference from, the video game version of George to, the one portrayed in the film. Like I said, walking out of this movie, I think I ended up loving Ralph more than I ever have. I I think I've only played Ralph like twice ever in the games, and I've never actually played a full game through from beginning to end with that character. Every time, the one or two times I've ever played him as him, um, it was only for like maybe a few levels. It was just kind of to waste some time for something or other, and that was that. And I walked out of there, I'm just like, I think I'm gonna have to play Ralph more. And I don't know, maybe he's my favorite character, because obviously for me, being a Godzilla fan, Lizzie was always my favorite. And then I just kind of, I don't know, I'm walking out and I kind of like Ralph a little bit more. I like all three of them, quite frankly. I mean, again, there's not much to them. Wolf, crocodile, and gorilla. I mean, there's just there. It's nothing too tremendously spectacular. Although, like I said before on the last episode, at least when it comes to the big city brawlers, this one is my favorite because it's a nice solid. It's a nice solid figure. But um, but I think as far as like actual characters go, I think Ralph came out looking really badass. I mean, the whole quill thing, I mean, it was just a quick shot. The way he looked and the way he acted. I do like the whole flying squirrel thing. I think that was a nice little touch.
That was also pretty unique. It seems like Ralph was the only one out of the three that had more special abilities or unique abilities.
I don't know if it was something in which the director or someone writing the movie, if Ralph was their favorite character and they just decided to do that for him, or what the deal was. But I like it. His whole scene too in the forest, that whole forest scene with the military men, just spectacular, brutal but spectacular. And then the scene where he's jumping off the mountain and he goes after the helicopter. I'm just like, that is just so. I mean, it was in the trailer, so I mean, I knew it was there. But at the same time, though, you look at it and you're just like, that is so badass. I love it.
And I can remember you texting me saying that this movie could have been a rated R movie, and I was like, oh boy. So I was kind of a bit curious what you were talking about, and then after seeing it, I was like, yeah, I can see where he's coming from.
That Ralph scene is really the first section in which it starts showing some what I consider R material,
right?
And then after that, there are a few other. I think the whole George flipping Dwayne Johnson off as many times as he did was, I think, another thing. But
well, and then Brett Whiten getting squished by the rubble and seeing
that too. Yeah, I mean, getting back to the monsters, though, I mean, well, and then too with Ralph in that helicopter scene, did you happen to notice like the helicopter blades like hit him, but they just kind of fell off? They just kind of broke apart as they hit him.
Yeah,
like, just badass. But yeah, I think as far as the movie goes, again, I like all three of them for their own particular reasons. But I think the one that I ended up coming out liking more was Ralph in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, though, too, I was in terms of the fighting of the creatures. I knew they were going to have to put up their dukes before the movie closed. I knew George more or less was going to survive, even though I kind of thought, yeah, they might kill all of them. But then at the same time, I'm like, well, George is primate, closest to humans. They may keep him alive. And I thought, okay, well, how's this fight going to go? And a small part of me thought it could be, because I looked at the art and making of Rampage book. They had some material in there that at least told me that George and Ralph were going to team up and go against Lizzie. That didn't really happen here in the film.
They kind of somewhat teamed up when they were heading to New York.
Well,
like that.
Well, I mean, against Lizzie, in terms of attacking Lizzie, they didn't really team up. And I thought maybe what they could do, because again, I was kind of basing a little bit off of it from what I saw in the book, even though I understand what you see in some of these books doesn't always go into the films. But I kind of thought maybe they would have George and Ralph team up, destroy Lizzie because Lizzie's the real big baddie here. And then at the end, it was going to be between George and Ralph. But then I'm like, that would kind of work. But I'm going, again, Lizzie is the big bad here. She's bigger than the other two. And I'm like, that just, from a movie telling standpoint, you don't do that. You don't get rid of your big bad first. Your big bad has to be the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, it's going to end up, and I'm just like, Ralph is going to go first, and then it's going to be between George and Lizzie, and George is going to win. And that's exactly what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically more or less had it figured out going into the film. Let me just say this though too, I guess a third disappointment of mine. Again, not a real big one that damages my enjoyment of the movie. I didn't like the fact though that after Willis Tower went down and then the monsters went at it, that Ralph went out pretty quickly. I didn't care for that.
Yeah.
I was hoping he'd stay in longer. I was hoping, again, like maybe a team up with George against Lizzie for a little bit at least.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get like a little bit of good fisticuffs going here for a bit before we start, knocking everyone off. But he goes out within like 2-3 minutes of, them starting to go at it.
Now that I think about it, it seemed like he didn't really put up much of a fight.
He did. It's just that basically everyone was against him at that point, because when they start out, he's fighting Lizzie as Johnson and George are kind of getting their bearings and talking to one another in terms of how they are going to set up this fight. And then George goes after, I can't remember how it goes. Did Lizzie like knock Ralph off, or did George knock Ralph, or something happened to where Ralph and Lizzie got separated, and then Ralph went after George, and then Johnson started shooting grenades at Ralph to get Ralph off of George.
Mm-hmm.
And then he realized, oh, Lizzie's behind me. I'm going to try to lure Ralph to her to get him off of George. And so then he shoots Ralph. Ralph jumps off the building, does his flying squirrel thing, comes through the one skyscraper nearby, and then, of course, lands right in Lizzie's mouth, and then he's offed.
Mm-hmm. It seemed like he didn't really put up much of a fight.
No, he did. It's just he got tag team more or less by like 3 other people, more or less. Yeah.
The other thing that we haven't touched upon yet is the score to the film.
I meant to download that and listen to it, but because of the week I'm having, I just didn't have the time. I'm saddened though that there is no physical CD, but again, the times we live in.
I was fortunate enough to listen to it on Spotify on my account here. I don't know if you were going to do anything else, like another review after when we're done reviewing Rampage. I know I was going to kind of review the motion picture soundtrack to Rampage and the like, but the score to it, from listening to it along with the film, and then as well as listening to it on Spotify, it really mixes in well with the film and portraying what the film is about, and it just really fits well.
Who's the composer?
The composer's name is Andrew Lockington. The more familiar ones that I have listened of his was the film that Dwayne Johnson was also in, and that was San Andreas. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of old fashioned. I like to have CDs and everything. I was hoping they would do that, but then at the same time, again, this is a movie being released in April. It's kind of a B popcorn film. I'm like, they're not going to put a whole lot of resources into bringing a physical media copy out of this, for this film score. But then at the same time, too, part of it is the times that we live in, too, where a lot of things are digital, which, look, people, dump the digital, start buying physical media again. You start buying physical media enough, people, your manufacturers will be like, all right, let's do this. I mean, I like physical media because heaven forbid things can happen to your clouds, things can happen to your devices, and then, oh shit, everything's gone. I mean, it just, but anyway.
You also gotta have some of those devices, and like if there's some kind of EMP that happens or something like that, you gotta put them in an EMP proof sort of thing.
Well, and it just, I don't trust technology. And my old man rant here is just like I've gotten to a point where I am trusting technology less and less. Jason knows
the old man Kent.
Jason, you guys want to know why? Big sidetracking note here in the show. You guys want to know why I didn't post an actual video this last week about our whole YouTube thing, which is probably why we have no one watching this live right now. The main reason is because, God damn it, I was having issues with microphones, and Jason knows about this because I was bitching to him.
He's not kidding.
I was bitching to him. I'm like, motherfucker, none of these microphones work. I had to buy a new camera that actually, did things with external microphones. It came with an external mic, and I'm like, son of a bitch, the damn mic doesn't really work. So I'm trying to buy more mics. Nothing worked. Bought a lapel mic. That damn thing didn't work either. Finally, I went to Best Buy, bought a Rode mic that sits on top of my camera. That thankfully worked, but by then it was too late to make a video because, gosh, I mean, wouldn't have the time to put it together, and it just wouldn't have been worth it anyways. And then I got a lapel mic today that works, and I'm like, son of a bitch. I'm like, that's the reason. It's not that I forgot to do it. It's just that technology sucks. Anyways, I'm done. Back to the movie.
Well, before we get into the movie, one thing I want to point out, I was talking about that whole Adobe thing, and I checked out the kind of the facts and everything. Yes, I can have up to at least 2 devices. However, it can only open up one application. Like if I wanted to open up Photoshop on my computer, but you have it like open up on your computer, I can't open Photoshop up. So that's the only thing.
That's what I got to say to technology. That's all I got to say. Unless
if you want to pay $20 a month just for Premiere Pro or something like that.
I mean, you're gonna have to cut like this section out of like the iTunes and audio version. Because we're so sidetracked here, but again, Adobe doesn't provide physical media.
That's the fun part
either. It's this whole stupid cloud stuff. It's
not much you can do about it for right now.
You suck, microphone. But anyway, you were talking about the score.
But I kind of basically just kind of mentioned what I wanted to say. And I know you asked me of who composed for the film. It was the same guy who did San Andreas, which Dwayne Johnson also starred in, which is Andrew Lockington. I don't want to get too much into it since I want to also do a review on this after when we're done reviewing the film here. So if you have anything else on the score, what your take on it was, how.
I have nothing because I have not listened to it.
Well, I'm not talking about just the track, but like how did it sound like in the film?
How did it sound like in the film? I thought it worked. I mean, at least when I was watching the movie, I didn't notice it too much. That's not to say that I didn't hear it. It's just that maybe I guess a good thing about it was that it wasn't distracting. It wasn't trying to take away from the film like some scores do sometimes.
Right.
But I mean, it obviously worked because, like I said, I didn't find myself at any point thinking, "Hey, wait a minute! Like the music and everything here, like it's really off or whatever. It's messing with my enjoyment of the movie here or anything." I unfortunately won't really know again until not only do I listen to the soundtrack, but until I see the movie again as well. But definitely, at least from what I can kind of recall from my movie going experience, at the very least, I will say this, and I'm not saying that it's a bad score. I don't think it is, but because I listened to a brief clip of the first track of this deal on, I think, Amazon the day it was released, and the brief, like 30 seconds or whatever that I listened to, um, I thought it basically captured the essence or the type of film that this is, because it was, I think, what was it called, Space or whatever, like that first track was called, and it kind of was the ominous.
Yeah, that was the name of the first track on this, is Space.
Yeah, and like I said, I mean, the very brief bit that I listened to, I liked. As far as in the film itself, it seems serviceable. And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. What I mean by serviceable in this context is it did what it was supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a success. But do we want to go into closing arguments? Not arguments, but closing statements and a rating here for Rampage?
Yeah, I think we can go into that. I can't really think of anything else. Yeah, this if it's like I know a lot of people kind of complain about video game adaptation films and all that. I know when it comes to these kinds of movies, they usually kind of tend to get a bad rap. A lot of the times, I think there at least have been a couple of times, I can't remember some of them, besides Mortal Kombat, that they were pretty good. But when it comes to this film, to me, I believe that this by far is the best video game adaptation film that I have seen so far. And of course, it's not going to probably win a whole lot of awards. If it's going to, I would say at least the visual effects. If there's like a fight award or something, it might get that. And if it gets maybe like an award for film score and all that, I can definitely see that too. But yeah, there are some kind of a little bit of cheesy moments, such as the villains, the Widens in this. They're kind of the cookie cutter, cheesy kind of villain. And then my only gripe / complaint was on the visual effects, was what I mentioned about Dwayne Johnson's hand kind of over part of George's hand there. You can definitely tell that it was visual effects, and you can kind of see a jumble here and there. But that's probably my only gripe on the visual effects. But as far as the character development, and as well as what the story was going at, it really pulled off in this. And the visual effect, not visual effects, the score to the film, it's just phenomenal. yeah, it everything besides kind of my little gripes on it slash complaints, it really entertained me, and that's all I care about at the end of the day. Does a movie entertain me? It certainly did. And as far as some of the gory parts, I would say it's probably not for the lighthearted kind of people out there. It's kind of on the edge of R-rated in certain areas, especially when we talked about the whole Ralph slash Force scene with the Black Op people, and they're trying to retrieve or take down Ralph in there. You'll probably kind of get to see certain imagery in that, which you probably would get maybe a little bit lightheaded or something like that. I don't know how
I
others
did
will go
briefly.
through some of that. But other than that, it's a really entertaining movie. Of course, it's going to have a couple flaws. I mean, movies aren't perfect in any sort of form or way. Rampage, definite buy for me.
Yeah, I mean, look, anyone who is aware of the video games and just in general the material this is based off of, and really when you take a look at the trailers, and even if that does, those two things don't get you, knowing the kinds of movies the Rock does entertaining action type films, and so this is not going to be some sort of deep type artsy fartsy film. This is a film that if you go into it, really your only expectations are just monster smashing crap. That, as long as it delivers on that for the most part, hey, you should walk out satisfied
Mm-hmm.
with it. And those were my expectations going in. I wasn't expecting a really good story and plot, which is indeed what we got. I mean, of course, again, it's not Oscar material, but it's still really good. Like I said, better than what the film probably deserved. And then on top of that, you had pretty good characters with this. You had a fairly decent score. Like I said, I haven't been able to listen to it on its own, but at least for what it was able to do within the movie itself, I enjoyed it. I like the designs of the three creatures, Lizzie, Ralph, and George. Again, going back to my three, what I consider very minor complaints about this film, the fact that we didn't get more rampaging in urban areas. Again, I think a lot of that had to deal with budget.
And
And
time
then
constraints.
maybe I think you could do it and do it well if you pace things better. Um, and then on top of that, too, spending just a little bit more time with Ralph and Lizzie as well during the course of the movie. And then my final complaint was just once Willis Tower came down and then the three monsters were going at each other, the fact that Ralph got off very quickly um, was just kind of disappointing. But at the same time, they're very minor for me because this movie did things very well. I really thought that despite the fact you didn't have a ton of rampaging being portrayed throughout the movie, the fact that it's kind of like a 70s Godzilla movie where you get little if anything over the course of the movie, but then it pays off at the end of the film. That's where
Mm-hmm.
you get the big monster brawl, and that's where you get all the scenes of destruction and stuff like that as well. That's in many respects kind of what it reminded me of, where
Mm-hmm.
sadly, yeah, you don't see a nationwide tour of the Three Monsters trashing your major metropolitan areas, but you get very brief clips here and there, like at Mount Rushmore. Pretty funny, Ralph eating tourists from a bus. But
Yeah.
but nevertheless, though, it pays off because that conclusion took a large chunk of the at the end of the movie. The movie's only what, like an hour 47 minutes, and I would argue probably the final 45 minutes. or more is probably the area in Chicago, and it it goes by very fast because it's so friggin' entertaining. You don't get a lot of explosions and stuff until the end, but it pays off, and it's entertaining. It's spectacular. That's all I wanted out of a film like this. I mean,
Mhm.
we're giant monster fans here. We go to see giant monsters. Because not only are they cool to look at, but because they trash cities and they fight each other. That's the only reason. And if this movie
Right.
can provide that, which is basically what I was expecting, hey, you're good to go. The movie succeeded, and it did deliver that, and it did succeed on that level. But it also gave us bonuses. It gave us pretty darn good characters and a pretty good plot as well. The movie was self-referential in a few points because you saw in a Rampage arcade game in a few scenes there in the Wyden's office. Some people have issues with that. I don't. I think it's a nice little wink, wink, nudge, nudge to fans. Um, this is a really fun and entertaining movie. As far as the whole video game thing, is this the best? I don't know. It's definitely tied, at least with number one, with Mortal Kombat, in my opinion. I still love Mortal Kombat. That's one of my all-time favorite films. It was a movie I recently rediscovered back in February. I hadn't watched it in many years, and I rediscovered it, and I'm just like, wow! Like I was amazed at how many actual fights there were in that movie and how well choreographed they are. Even Mortal Kombat Annihilation, for all of its flaws, there was a lot of fighting and a lot of great fighting choreography in that one as well. Um, and then the Resident Evil films, the whole what do you call it? Like was 6 movies, like a Cess trilogy. I don't know what you would call it. Cess trilogy. I don't know what it would be called. Um, with all of that, um, I really like the first Resident Evil movie. I think that really captures kind of the. I'm not a huge Resident Evil gamer,
Yeah,
um,
same here.
but I've seen enough of it, and I played just enough of at least a couple of the games to kind of get an idea of what it's about. But I'm just that first Resident Evil movie is my favorite out of all of them, and then all the sequels have some essence of what I have either seen in my brief gameplay of those of a couple of those games, or what I've heard about from other people who have played those games. Um, so, in my personal opinion, uh, the in no order, Resident Evil, Rampage, and the first Mortal Kombat movie are really uh, the big tops as far as video game films go. But I would say Rampage and Mortal Kombat are just a little bit better than that first Resident Evil movie, although that still is a pretty damn good film. That's kind of tough because boy, that is a good film. And for me, at the very least, until I watch it some more and everything, it's tied with eh, Mortal Kombat, and it's I think it's okay too if it stays tied with Mortal Kombat because I personally do love Mortal Kombat. I think it's a movie that, outside of uber mega violence, like what the video games served, it delivers very well too from the video game adaptation, while also delivering something I think for general audiences to follow and to grasp on too, as well. And by the way, Mortal Kombat and the first Resident Evil film, both directed by the same man, Paul W.S. Anderson. So imagine that. Maybe Paul W.S. Anderson had an invisible hand in Rampage, which is why Rampage is also near the top. No, I just
I don't think that'd be the
no,
case.
no. But um, in the end, Rampage is a really fun film. I mean, obviously, if you are a huge fan of giant monsters, and obviously, if you're here listening to this or watching this on YouTube, you love giant monsters. And if you haven't seen Rampage, what's wrong with you? It's a really fun movie, pretty darn good acting, a really good story, better than it deserves. A lot of great little Easter eggs and winks and nods to the games as well over the years. Um, just wonderful time. Yeah, it gets pretty intense with some of the violence in a few spots.
Mhm.
Uh, but at the same time, I think it delivers on what it's about, and it's just it's I had an awesome time with this film. I didn't know going into it how long the movie was. I thought maybe 2 hours. It's close to that, but I thought the movie was maybe even an hour and a half. I mean, there's so much going on. You find yourself fully invested in what's going on there. That time is a breeze. You don't even realize where the time has gone because you're having so much fun with this. Rampage, definite buy. I mean, I can't recommend this film enough. Heck, my wife's been gone the last couple days. We tried getting our babysitter to kind of give me a little bit of a break, like Friday evening, and I thought to myself, okay, well, if the babysitter comes over, what am I going to do? I don't know what I'm going to do with my time. And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe go out and have dinner. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like if we can get the babysitter to come over to watch the kids and I can go out on the town for a few hours, I'm going to go see Rampage again. Well, sadly, the babysitter couldn't come over. So I'm like, well, damn it. So, but at the same time, I was kind of expecting that because we kind of asked her very last minute. But I love this movie. It's great. It's a solid recommend. You love giant monsters and all that. You got to check it out. And I think you have to buy it. I mean, it's a solid film. It's a solid film.
Awesome. Well, do you have anything else to review on or anything? No? Well, then I'll just review the original motion picture soundtrack to Rampage. And like I mentioned earlier, the score was scored by Andrew Lockington, who also did another film that Dwayne Johnson starred in, which was San Andreas. And for the soundtrack, there's a total number of 24. And the very last one, it seems kind of like it's going to be a trend when it comes to this composer that the very last track is going to be done by another artist, where they kind of have that certain track where they kind of have a singer part,
An artist.
yeah, a different artist in it, just like San Andreas. And when comparing to his score on this film with San Andreas, which he also did, I can see kind of his signature kind of tone and how he kind of does his own scores to the films. And it seems like he kind of does more kind of maybe on the side of the kind of the epic tone to the soundtracks or the tracks. And that's kind of somewhat kind of the scores that I usually kind of go for, is kind of, they kind of have that kind of the epic tone to each individual track. And they really do fairly well, especially not just when they're incorporated into the film, but just by themselves. And that's when you know if the track does well, both do well in the film and also by themselves. You know that you're going to get a good quality music right there. And it seems like so far with Andrew Lockington, the two soundtracks that I've heard of his, including Rampage, that he's going to be one of those up and coming good composers in the long run. And I'm starting to really like him. I think he was a really good fit for Rampage, for the kind of things that's like with the destruction and everything going on in here. It's just a really good set of tracks that he has composed in this. And with it being 24 songs, with him composing 23 of them, the total runtime for this entire soundtrack is an hour, 13 minutes, close to a half hour shorter than the film, which is a good amount of tracks to choose from to incorporate into the Rampage film. It's a really good soundtrack. If you have Spotify like I do or Pandora, definitely queue it on your account. And if you're like old man Kent over here, try to find a physical copy of the CD. So Rampage, the original motion picture soundtrack, definite buy.
By the way, I'm Kent and Jason. We are the co-hosts of the Daikaiju Network Podcast. Some news I just saw. It's 10 hours old, at least from what it is here on Facebook here. Anyone who is familiar with some of the news that's been going on with the Caddyshack restaurant at the hotel, they know that moved into the area in which Artist Alley has been over the last couple of years.
Oh, yeah.
And G-Fest just posted a thing on Facebook here where they are saying that the Artist Alley had to relocate downstairs due to the Caddyshack restaurant. And it says you can take the escalator downstairs or press the LL button in the elevator, and it will take you to the end of the hallway where the artists are outside the room. Take the time to see the Artist Alley outside and other attractions.
Outside the room, what does that mean?
The Love A and B room. So it is kind of where I thought they were.
Oh, is it at that corner?
I think so. Like that hallway where our favorite hallway of ours,
Yeah.
It's basically, it's that hallway, and then Love A and B, which is kind of, those first rooms you see if you're walking down.
I kind of had a feeling that's probably where they were going to be, because out of all the rooms there besides the Midway Theater, which all is just permanent seats and tables in that room, the only biggest room to accommodate all those artists was those 2 rooms there.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of what I was thinking too, because I'm like, there's no other place down there really that could accommodate them.
And plus you got the gaming whole area now in that ball morale room, which I probably would have at least considered switching those 2 around, having the ball morale room more for the Artist Alley and then having Love A and B mainly for the gamers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's
they might maybe think about it, if because I know they kind of do that Q&A thing on the last day as one of their panels and stuff. We'll kind of see if someone brings that up or something, or maybe one of us can bring it up. Who knows?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a bummer. I'm sure the Caddyshack restaurant has nice food and everything, but
I hope it doesn't take a whole lot of business out of Chicago Fire Oven there.
I was wondering that too. I mean, obviously for a while, because it's a new deal, it's going to obviously draw a lot of attention, but it opens up at 11. I think it stays open until 10 most nights, if I recall. It's Chicago Fire Oven obviously is open for breakfast, but I had to remind myself, I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. Like, Chicago Fire Oven closes down a couple times each and every day. It's not open all the time. But they open for like a few hours for breakfast, close down for a few hours, open up for a few hours for lunch, close down for a few hours, then open up a few hours for dinner. So they're not, I mean, sure, they probably will lose a little bit of money because some people may decide to go to the Caddyshack restaurant instead. But I don't think it's going to hurt them that much. At least I don't think it will. But
yeah, we'll just have to find out more in the long term.
I mean, I was a little sad by that. I mean, I like Caddyshack. I think it's a funny movie. I don't think it's the spectacular movie like some people think it is, but I'm sure the food there, of course, is good. But I don't know. I'm a very sentimental and nostalgic guy, and so knowing that the last time, when we were there last year, that that room, it used to be like a banquet hall, more or less, for the hotel, and it was very special to me because obviously that was Artist Alley, meaning that that part of the hotel was also reserved for G Fest and
Mhm.
and all that stuff. Um, it just kind of makes me sad a little bit. It's kind of like it's the end of an era, and let's say just hypothetically, what if the Caddyshack restaurant goes out of business in a couple of years? What happens there? Like, is the hotel going to try to sell that space again, or should I say rent it out, or are they going to try to renovate it back as part of the hotel, and then it's going to be part
That
for Chief? I
that
don't know,
that
but
that could be my guess if it comes to that, but we'll just have to wait and see in kind of in the long-term sense. Uh, the only thing we'll have to kind of see how it goes is the amount of people there. But with us kind of being there for a convention, it's probably not gonna maybe not give us a definite uh, kind of thing if it's going to succeed or not. We probably would have to kind of go back there, like kind of like another full week, maybe one of these days, just to kind of figure that out. But yeah, that's kind of going to be the one thing is if it's going to have a whole lot of people in there.
yeah, I mean, obviously during G Fest, anyways, you have a full hotel. So obviously, yeah, you will get some people going to Caddyshack, but still you're gonna get people who are going to go to Chicago
Mhm.
Fire Oven. I think Chicago Fire Oven has awesome food too. So
Yeah.
I mean, I do love.
The
I always
the
order the
only
same
thing
thing.
about it is it's a little bit pricey.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's in the hotel. I mean, you're basically paying for convenience, more or less, with something like that.
Hmm.
But anyways, Uh, I think that wraps up episode 113 of the Daikaiju Network Podcast. We
In
are
the
on
books.
YouTube and we're doing it live. Nobody watched us live, but that's partially our fault because, you know, I had issues with the camera and
Well, it's not just you. Although we kind of put it up there more in advance, but I think it's probably just going to be more of a gradual thing. It's not going to be like not going to see everyone just frolicking in and everything. I
well,
think it's just
yeah.
kind of be more of a gradual thing.
Well, and the thing too with you and I mean, we usually try to get together on Saturdays at 1:30 Eastern time, and usually it doesn't always work. Like either we had technical difficulties with Skype, or we didn't
Right.
always maybe necessarily get started on time. But of course, if we're doing these now, we're gonna have to be more punctual, and so that
Right.
means we agree on a time. It's like, okay, we got to make sure we don't. We can maybe be a couple minutes late, but not
Yeah.
much more than that.
But at least on the live YouTube thing, just before we start the broadcast and everything, we'll start. We'll talk to one another and all that. But
I think
like,
what we need to do, and this is just, basically, was it shop talk? You and I think, are going to have to, because usually we set up the times to get together to do these like a couple days before we actually record. One of the things I think is going to help us out is you and I are going to have to talk about it before early. We're going to have to talk about it sooner. We're gonna have to, like, let's
right.
say, like, for example, our next podcast, as an example, bring up the calendar here, is gonna be May 5th. So like, for example, usually we would talk about like either May 1st, 2nd, or 3rd as far as setting up a time. Well, this time we may have to try to get something set up by like the 27th or 26th of April. So then that way we can really advertise
Yeah,
and
because
send out reminders through social media, letting everybody know, hey, episode 114, we're going to be doing Hot Diggity Do or whatever for our discussion. And we're going to
by the
be
way, what is the
streaming.
next episode?
I don't know. Talk for a moment while I bring up my deal here.
Let's see here. What else is there? Oh yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, we should at least kind of discuss the time at least a week in advance, so I can at least set up a reminder on the YouTube
On the old
page.
YouTube.
So then that way, when people go on there on our channel and then see kind of the upcoming stream, which is kind of basically just right underneath our banner and everything, and then there's a button where it says set reminder. So at least they'll have something there to kind of put on their calendar there. Old man Kent with his grandpa.
Well, it scared me there for a moment. I thought I lost the document. I'm like, oh shit, what happened? And I'm just like, oh wait a minute, I'm not in the appropriate.
Yeah, it's like
not in the appropriate folder yet.
It's like if you couldn't find it, I can at least try to bring it up.
I found it. I'm here. Just loading it up here. All right. Oh, wait a minute. No, we're gonna have to be pushing everything back. Or okay, here's the thing, because I totally forgot about Rampage when I made this initially. So, and originally, what we were gonna do for this episode was the Manster. And then 114 was going to be Golden Bat. So here's something that we could do. Episode 116 was either going to be Demaking, which I thoroughly suggest we don't do ever, or it was going to be a Kaiju Potpourri episode. Something we could possibly do is either move Manster to 114 and then move Golden Bat to 116, or do Golden Bat and then move Manster to 116, or do Kaiju Potpourri for 116 and then like move Manster further back.
Oh man. Why don't we do let's have the Manster as the next episode.
And then move Golden Bat to 116?
What's on 115?
Warning from Space.
Yeah, sure.
Do you have Warning from Space?
No, I do not. Because I was going to mention that that's going to be another movie I'll need to purchase.
So Manster for next time.
Let me see on Amazon here.
You should be able to get it for a couple bucks. That's, I think, where I got mine. I have the Japanese cut too for Warning from Space. I think what I might try to do, it's kind of tough. I will say this about Warning from Space.
It's available on Prime for free.
Oh well, there you go.
There we go.
I will say though about Warning from Space, I do really like the movie, but at the same time, it gets pretty sluggish in certain parts too. I have seen the Japanese edit. I've seen it once, I think. It definitely is longer and has a little bit more filler, but it still has a good story. But it is, yeah, again, it's still a little sluggish. So
I'm probably guessing as far as this one that's free for Prime. Oh, and they've got one of the Starman ones free for Prime.
Oh,
damn.
Okay. Well, I own all those, so I forgot to add those.
But as far as this version of Warnings from Space, I'm going to have to at least see this one to see if it's like the original Japanese one that you're talking about, or
it's going to be the American.
Yeah, that's probably my guess.
So we're doing Manster for 114, Warning from Space, and then 116, where instead of doing either Demaking or Kaiju Potpourri, we're doing Golden Bat.
Sounds just about right.
Yeah, I totally forgot about the Starman stuff. You should look into buying those too. I forgot to put those on the schedule here.
Yeah. I know I've kind of tempted to. Probably the only place that I know of getting those was from that one dealer, kind of in that corner part of the dealer's room there. Until it's like I was um a little bit hesitant of doing that for the last, well, ever since of us going to G Fest, right up until last year when I bought at least a couple DVDs from him, which was the Golden Bat and Spectre Man, um, which the quality of those are pretty good. So yeah, I'll probably get some of the Starman ones from that guy.
I bought mine several years ago on.
I'm probably
Here we
guessing
are
they could be
on
expensive.
Amazon. Here's Starman Volume 2, $14, only 3 left. I'm having to really scroll through here. Starman Volume 1, not available, but there are some sellers on Amazon selling it for $3. You probably could even check eBay too. And then let's see,
I don't really do
that's
much
it,
of
actually.
eBay.
It's only volume. Yeah, it's only volume. Oh, I can't even see it from here, damn it. Yeah, I think there are only 2 volumes with four movie. No. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe when we stop the broadcast, you can probably go over there and check.
Yeah. Well, I can see here. Yeah, okay. It's only 2 volumes. 2 volumes, 4 movies.
Okay.
Although they were technically serials, but oh well. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, you can get volume 2 for $14. Volume 1 they don't sell via the site, but people are selling it for like $3 plus on Amazon. Like I said, always eBay too.
Right.
So, with that, thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, we didn't get anybody live. And again, don't be afraid to come here, chat with us. We always have the YouTube window up too.
Right.
We want everyone to join in the discussion of our topics here. Usually, of course, they're movies and reviews and all that. Don't be afraid to add in your discussion. But of course, as we stated before on the last episode, anything that comes up in the chat window, we reserve the right to repeat some of that stuff. So if you were to come in and say Rampage is the bomb, I will say Moneyman 3000 says Rampage is awesome, or something of that sort. So we reserve the right to kind of bring any of that stuff up that comes up in the chat box there. So at the same time, yeah, just come on board. We really would like to have you involved here and join the discussion. We like doing these things live. It's sort of a performance as well, so to speak, even though we're not doing juggling or anything like that. But
yeah, and then like I said at the beginning of the episode here, that as of right now things are going to be a little bit basic, but over time I want to kind of figure things out with this OBS thing, and then kind of create some graphics, and then kind of have our own little production kind of show going on here, and kind of make things look spiffy.
Wow. But yeah. But yeah, I mean, definitely just come on board, get involved with the show and all that too. And we love having you come on here. I mean, even though we haven't actually done anything here yet, but I'm glad everything worked out so far. So this is definitely a lot better than Skype. So already,
definitely,
when we're done here, Jason can immediately post this link onto our social media pages and be like, "Hey, the podcast is up."
They're already posted up on there. Like I just mentioned about that earlier.
Okay. But yeah, okay. Well, again, thank you so much for listening, and we hope to catch you guys here in a couple of weeks when we discuss the Manster. And again, we will really try to let people know a lot sooner now about times, and we're going to really try to heavily just throw reminders out there to everyone about start times as far as when we're going to do these. And because we want all of you guys to get involved, and we want you guys especially when it comes to a lot of these films. Rampage is one of them too. But I'm a huge fan of classic films. That's not to say I don't like the newer films. I really do like a lot of the newer films too. But as I've gotten older, I've grown to really even, and I've always loved the old films, but as I've gotten older, I've grown to really love old films even more, like even old American films, like the science fiction films
Mhm.
and classic horror films, for that matter. Mainly for me personally, like at least in American films go, basically from the 30s up through the 60s are kind of like my big focus for a lot of things, especially when it comes to the science fiction and classic horror stuff.
Yeah.
And for me, the Manster, and I've talked about this really, gosh, ever since how long ago did I buy that DVD? I mean, I've been looking for that thing since 2012, and I finally bought it when, like, I think 2 years later, something like that, like in 2014. I think it was 2014. Yeah. Um, it's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love it. I think it's a really goofy movie with its concept, but at the same time, it's so thoroughly entertaining. I'm so happy that we finally get a chance to really talk about it and to discuss it. And I remember when I was putting this schedule together, I was going through the films that I have in my personal library back here, and I was really shocked at the fact that we didn't actually talk about the film yet, because I personally have owned that film. It'll be 4 years now this summer, and I bragged about it relatively often on this podcast
Well, simply because
since
we've
then.
been redoing a lot of the early Godzilla reviews.
Well, yeah, but at the same time, though, too, we would go off the reservation, so to speak, once in a while and do something different, just for the sake of change. And I was just shocked that we still never did that. And it just, I'm so excited now to finally be able to talk about this film. I own both the DVD and the recent Blu-ray release, and it's a guilty pleasure of mine. It's one of those films I watch a couple times each year. It has its own issues, and of course, we'll get into all that stuff a couple weeks from now. But this is a really fun movie, folks, and with I think it's Scream Factory having released it onto Blu-ray recently. Go purchase it. It's on their website. I'm sure even Amazon has it as well. Um, go pick it up. Go buy it. Redundancy on my part there, but it's well worth your time and your money. It is. Uh, it's a really fun film. Please buy it and watch it. Just at the very least, watch it before our next episode. Because again, we want people to get involved with the conversations here. This is one of my personal favorites as far as guilty pleasures go within the Japanese kind of horror science fiction genre. Um, please watch it. The Manster. It is. It's a delight. It is. It's a really fun film.
Yeah, yeah. I was gonna bring up my Blu-ray case of it. It's like I usually had it on my coffee table, but it's over at my TV stand here. So I was like, damn it! It's like I don't have the time to pick it up right now and show it in front of the screen here. But yeah, I finally got a copy of it after all these years of you trying to uh, bitching me out trying to get it.
I still couldn't believe it. Not only was I shocked that we hadn't covered it on here, because we almost, Kat Roca, Josh Finney, and Patrick McAvoy. Sorry, we haven't had you guys on the show for well over a year now. And I remember we had discussed potentially doing a commentary with that movie, and it just obviously never came up. But I not only was I shocked that we hadn't covered it here in any way, shape, or form on here, other than my constant, ramblings about it periodically, but I was just shocked too. I was still shocked that you son of a bitch did not pick it up yet.
The one thing is that it's like I know we hear about it at G Fest, and then I probably have seen a couple clips here and there. It's like and then you talking about it, it's like I know, but then I've got other things to take care of, and a lot of the times too, I just keep forgetting about it here and here and there, and it's like kind of like the Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla when we're doing the review of that. It's like I don't even have the movie of that, which also surprises me. So that's going to be one of my to-do lists sort of thing is I'm hoping someone, one of the dealers at G-Fest has a copy of Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, the 1974 version of the film. But I know I'm probably not going to be surprised if the price to that is going to be a little bit pricey to it. But at least I can still get it, and I'll still have a physical copy of it.
All right. Well, this is like our third or fourth goodbye now.
Yeah. How many episodes have we done that?
A lot of them. We just get off on a tangent, but hey, that's what we're here for, is to talk about kaiju and all that fun stuff. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Please join us for all these episodes.
Yeah, you can hit that thumbs up button down below if you like this episode. You can also, if you also like us too, you can hit that subscribe button, as well as hit the bell icon down there, so you can get notifications for when we're live doing our Daikaiju Network podcast, or when we upload new videos, as far as maybe reviews of movies, toys, or maybe like opinion pieces, because I know Kent will probably be doing some of those.
I've been really wanting to do more of those things. I really have been wanting to do more stuff. I mean, we've been talking about YouTube stuff for the last 2-3 years now, and it's never really worked out until now. And these podcasts are definitely one way for us to get, and not only content on there, but consistent content. And
then you can also listen to us via audio version as well, through iTunes, as well as Google Play. There, so that kind of pretty much concludes everything.
All right, thank you.
Bye, guys. We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Come back for Manster.
Definitely.